Let's get started. Welcome to Music Portland's monthly industry event, First Mondays for May 2021. I'm going to give a very short update. I'm Mara McLaughlin. I'm Executive Director of Music Portland. And the only 2 points that I want to share are some big news that we have been allocated in the proposed budget to receive $100,000 from the city of Portland, and that will include money to create artist grants, to expand and accelerate a number of the programs that we have started, and we are endlessly thankful. For any of you that did not get the newsletter sent earlier today and didn't scroll down past the information about this event, please dig that out. Or if you would like, we're seeking people to send in written testimony to City Council to say why supporting the only organization committed to supporting independent popular musicians in this city is a worthy candidate to receive this money. It's the first time the city of Portland has actually financially made a significant commitment to support the popular for-profit music industry in our city. So it's a big deal. We also got news that it is on the proposed budget to fund and expand the Portland Film Office to be the Portland Office of Film and Music. And that again is a first time in the history of Portland that there has been a recognition of music and an independent music scene this way. So it's a pretty remarkable cycle for us. The only other thing I want to mention before I pass it over to the panelists is that this is the beginning of a deep conversation onto all ages. It will take many voices in the mix. We're going to tonight explore what's been done, where we are, and gather some initial ideas, but we welcome people to participate in roundtables that we'll be having after this to really start to dive into ideas and solutions. I think Austin will put in a link to the roundtables into the chat, but we hope that people will be engaged by this presentation and then want to move on. And in the immediate, right after this is the after party, where it's peer-to-peer. We're going to have small breakout sections, and we'd love to have everybody keep talking about the things that are raised. With that, I'm going to stop talking and pass it over to Evan Hoffer, who is part of my Music Policy Council and has been doing amazing work on this. Evan.
Hello, my name is Evan Hoffer. I am indeed part of the Music Portland Policy Council, doing research and looking through the books to figure out how to make more music happen in the city. And I am here to introduce our panelists, this amazing group of people we have in the room, as we put our heads together and think about what the future of all ages music can be, should be, at all stages and all elements of the ecosystem in Portland, from the small DIY club to access for people under 21 in big stages. So we can all be engaging and experiencing culture together. So I'd like to introduce the folks who are here in the room to have this conversation. And to remind you a couple things. If you have any questions throughout the experience, please feel free to raise hands or drop questions in the chat. Dropping things in the chat means we can, bring them into the conversation as we go, and then we'll have a formal Q&A at the end, in which we'll bounce questions and conversations off of each other. And as Mara said, if you'd like to be involved in talking and thinking through this future together as a community, please do sign up for that list that's coming out. So allow me to introduce you to our moderator, Kerry Clark. Carrie Clark is a champion of youth access, creativity, and justice in Portland. He was a founding member of Pdx Pop Now and the Arts and Culture Policy Director for the City of Portland under Mayor Sam Adams, Executive Director of Young Audiences of Oregon and Southwest Washington, which is the region's largest arts education nonprofit for the last 7.5 years. And as of a few months ago, now a full-time caregiver to one particularly young person. He was a leading force in the most recent set of reforms to the OLCC's youth access policies, and his LinkedIn bio reads community/art, youth/arts/education/leadership/civics/equity/inquiry/pizza on the side. Let me introduce you to Edo Mabenza-Ngoma, who is a content manager for the Numbers.fm, a music producer and a second-year student at Portland State University. Edo's artist name is King EDO, and he's lived in Portland since 2015. Edo has made music for about 5 years and has a strong goal to put the city on the map musically. David Pettinger is a Portland artist and radio intern, born and raised in Idaho, is passionate about music and building up communities associated with it. Coming to join us, but not here yet, is Taya Marshall, who is an audio editor at the Numbers.fm, a first-year business management and leadership student at PSU. Taya also raps, makes beats, and is a radio host and content creator at the Numbers. The show Serendipity at the Numbers is with her 2 friends who are also artists. Coming to us from Seattle, we have Kate Becker. From 1991 to 2003, Kate Becker was a constant driving force in Seattle's all-ages music community. She founded Redmond's Old Firehouse, a 500-capacity music venue, helped develop and served on the board of directors for the Vera Project, and was a member of Seattle's Music and Youth Task Force, the group that ultimately took down the Teen Dance Ordinance, which made it illegal for someone under the age of 18 to be in the same club as someone over the age of 21, replacing it with the All-Ages Dance Ordinance, which, among other things, eliminated age restrictions at all ages music. And is Taya here? Okay, got it. And let me introduce you to, from Boise, Nathan Walker. Nathan is the founder and owner of Sunless Sea Recording Company. His day-to-day includes managing, arranging albums by multiple artists, producing albums, executive production of all steps of album production, concept, artwork, manufacture, release strategies, promotion, etc. Nathan is also the executive director of Boise All Ages Movement Project, a nonprofit dedicated to establishing a local all-ages inclusive community space and music performing arts venue. From San Francisco, Casey Loudermilk, who has been assistant general manager at Bill Graham Civic Auditorium, the historic venue located in the heart of downtown San Francisco. With the COVID-19 pandemic, Casey has found himself as a newfound industry advocate, engaging actively as NEVA captain for the state and co-founding the SF Venue Coalition. He can talk about SB 793, a law in California that is being considered at the state level that could set promising precedents for youth access to live music. And from Portland, we have Gina Altamura, who's board president and a co-founder of Friends of Noise, a nonprofit org supporting creative youth in Portland through all ages concerts, workshops, and experience navigating the music scene. Friends of Noise has a goal of establishing a dedicated all ages music venue and community arts hub with youth leadership. She previously managed another like-minded nonprofit called Music in the Schools. In addition to her work with Andre Middleton at Friends of Noise, to advocate for all ages music opportunities in Portland, she is the talent buyer at Holocene. And with that, let me turn it over to Carrie Clark.
Thanks, Eben. Thanks, Mara. Thanks to the awesome list of people that I see streaming in here and to this incredible panel. I have learned a ton from the people on this panel that I have met before, and I am excited to learn a lot more from them and from the folks that are new to me. The struggle to make access to music open to everyone is real and ongoing and everywhere. How it presents from city to city, from block to block, varies quite a bit. So I think it's fantastic that Music Portland has taken the initiative to gather folks, not just from here in Portland or here in Oregon, but from around some Western states, folks that are in different parts of their advocacy efforts. And so I'm really excited to just hopefully do more listening than talking as moderator in this group of esteemed all ages advocates. To start, I want to say the thing that I'm perhaps most excited about with this group is that there are actual bona fide young people in it. And by that, I want to be clear that I don't mean that in any kind of patronizing way. I mean it in terms of like the technical, you are a minor if you are under 21 way that impacts so many of our lives and impacts the way that people who fall in that age category are able to access music in most places. So if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, I would love to hear a little bit from those of you who are under the age of 21 or have been recently here in Portland, here in Oregon. What is your experience like trying to interact with music here? What does it work? Are you able to? How do you engage with music right now?
Should I open first?
That'd be great.
So hi, I'm Ado. I am 20 years old and I've been in Portland for about like 6 years now. And when it comes to my music experience, I think for as long as I've been in Portland, I've been making music, and the least to say is like I've had a lot of tough run-ins and a lot of like interesting experiences. Like, for example, I know the conversation has been a lot leading. We've talked a lot about like concerts and concert venues. I remember like some of my first concerts, you run into the situation where people are doing pay to play on these big venues with bigger artists. I remember one of my first concerts was with an artist named got a little bit more popular, and I had to pay to play, and I ended up losing money instead of gaining money on that show. And I was like 18, 19 when I did that. And like, these are a lot of the situation that young artists are running into. And I also noticed that like, if it's not concerts, then it's accessibility to actually create. It's getting the decent type of mics that people need. It's getting someone who knows how to mix and master. That's our issue right now. Me, David, and Taya, we all live together and we make music almost every day, but I'm a beat maker. I'm not a great master or mixer. So I'm running into the issue where we have so much music, but we don't feel comfortable putting it out because it's not to the point where we want it to be. And like, we just feel like there isn't a lot of support in that sense, especially with financial issues. We're all either college students or like just got out of high school type situation, and we own an apartment. Like, we can't afford to put down $500 for a mix. A lot of money, and we just would hope that there is an accessibility, maybe a space to give young artists these opportunities to create their music and actually get their shows running without it being pay to play.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing a little bit about those challenges, Ado. David, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that? And Taya, I know that you are in the room, but not here by video. So if you have anything that you want to share by chat, feel free to do that. And maybe Ado and David can speak for you if they see you in the chat.
Yeah, so I think just echoing and reiterating a lot of things that Ada was saying, we had all sat down and compiled a list. Tay and I haven't been here in Portland as long as artists as Ado has. So I think that I'd even like to give up some more of my time into allowing him to speak more, to talk about more of the issues in Portland. But same things going on. We talked about, I know you guys have mentioned something sort of like an artist hub space where young people could come and collaborate, meet, work with other artists. That's been an issue we've been really running into, is that we want to work with people. We want to find people that we can work with. But for the most part, that comes down to our initiative in finding people, whether that be music we like, trying to hunt through Spotify and YouTube. There's not really many public platforms that we've found that are bringing people together like that. We've been really wanting to build up more of a cohesive community in Portland specifically, and also in our cities where we're from. Ado and I are from Boise, Idaho. Taya is from Anchorage, Alaska. And we haven't had a lot of support or like big music scenes in any of our cities. So in coming here and seeing a very similar situation, even though it's a much larger city than we're used to, it's fairly disappointing, to be honest. And we're just looking to start building that up as the youth, that we have the ideas, we know what we want, we know who we want it from, and we're really just looking for the opportunity ourselves to make the initiative and have the keys for change put into our hands.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I see Taya has been added to the gallery of faces here. Welcome, Taya. Do you have anything that you'd like to add at this point?
I think Ado and David really touched on the things that we're kind of faced with right now. So I definitely just want to like continue the conversation for sure and let Ado kind of explain a little bit more.
Great, thank you. I guess one question I have for y'all is, where do you see music? But I realize that's a weird question to ask right now because none of us see live music anywhere, which in a way is, I think, maybe healthy for those of us over 21 in terms of it's equalizing, right? Like we're now all in the same situation that many people under 21 find themselves in constantly, which is not able to engage with something that for many of us is life-giving and energy and this thing that is just a huge part of our lives. And so I'm hopeful that people who are over 21, and maybe this isn't a big issue for them oftentimes, or they've kind of forgotten what that experience is of not being able to see their favorite artist locally or coming through town. Maybe that's something we'll take from this experience is remembering that. But there's a difference. We know that we're in the process, whatever your opinion of it is, of reopening. Over this next year, concerts are going to begin again, and some people are going to be able to see live music easily, and others will not be able to see it easily, or maybe not be able to see it at all. And so my question to the young people again, and then we'll get the rest of us involved as well, is what are your plans for re-engaging with live music when that's a possibility? Where are you going to see it?
We haven't seen a lot about shows coming to Portland. When music starts coming back, like there's some festivals that are reopening, and like we've talked about it, but until like I know I've gotten half of my vaccine, so until like vaccines are like proven to be like until like everyone's gotten the vaccine and everything's okay and everything's good, like I don't think we're gonna be going to any like live venues. And like I know like Rolling Loud is coming back. I don't know if you've all heard of that music, like the now music festival. It's like kind of like Coachella, but for like all the SoundCloud rappers pretty much. And that's been announced for the summer, but again, COVID. So we talked about going, but I don't think we actually are, just because it's like there's going to be like thousands of people, and we don't want to spread COVID any more than we have to.
David, Taya, anything to add to that?
I think that Ado definitely hit it spot on, that there's definitely a lot of stuff that would be interesting to go to and participate in, but until things are figured out, it's not really an opportunity for us.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing essentially.
Great, thank you. So there's a variety of factors that make many spaces where music is performed not open to people under 21. We know that it varies from state to state, from city to city. Often it has to do with liquor laws and the fact that many venues, that's what drives their finances, that's how they keep their doors open. And so they sell alcohol. That's not their goal, but they do it because it keeps the doors open, and therefore young people are not able to be in that space. And there's a variety of solutions to that. And I think there's some great examples of different approaches to how do you make more spaces available to young people. There's spaces that you can set up that don't involve alcohol. There's creative, flexible approaches to how do you successfully regulate alcohol. There are all ages centered nonprofit spaces. And so I want to get to some of those stories here with these fantastic panelists about different approaches that you all have taken to make music more accessible to people like Ado, Taya, David, and other young people, and people of all ages. Let's remember that it's not just young people, it's everyone. So maybe let's begin with Kate. Kate, I feel like you probably are often in this position of speaking about your experience with the Vera Project. That's because that's a well-earned star, so to speak, because the Vera is often held up in Seattle as a wonderful model of what an all ages nonprofit music and art space can look like. So I'm hoping that maybe you can share a little bit about, a little bit about the space for folks who may not be familiar with it. And what were the sort of three, if you can simplify it, what were the three key pieces of how you approached creating that space that made it successful?
Thank you, Carrie. Nice to see you, by the way. Was it, when you say creating this space, do you mean the actual space the Vera Project is in now, or do you mean the legal space of all ages being a reality in Seattle?
I think both are really are relevant. So whichever direction you feel compelled to lead us.
Okay, so a little bit of a history lesson, everyone, if you will. So in the 90s and the late 80s, which was before I was ever in Seattle, I came in the 90s, and the all ages shows were illegal. We had a footloose-like law called the Teen Dance Ordinance. It made it illegal for young people to come together with people over the age of 21 for the purposes of dancing and listening to music. It was outrageous. I was an all ages show producer, and I was doing shows 20 minutes east of the city of Seattle in a town called Redmond, which you may have heard of because that's where Microsoft is from. And young people from the city were coming over all the time to the Redmond shows. I was living in the city of Seattle, and it was illegal for young people to come to shows while Seattle was internationally famous as a mecca for music, right? By that time, the big grunge explosion had happened. Everybody knew Seattle and music, except young people were standing outside clubs, wishing they could be inside, right? So we had to do something about this. So started organizing, lots of musicians were involved, lots of young people. And it was quite a time. The political powers wanted nothing to do with us. They would not take our meetings. They would not return our phone calls. Finally, we had to really engage in direct activism. We occupied the lobby outside their offices. So every time a council member came or went, they had to pass through a group of young people who wanted to talk to them about the importance of all ages shows and legalizing all ages shows. That had some effect, but not the effect we were looking for. We still weren't galvanizing support. Musicians then started disrupting city council meetings to stand up and play music. Some pretty famous musicians at the time, like Sean Nelson from Harvey Danger, and Ken Stringfellow from the Posies, and Rocky Vodolato, and all involved in actually making music happen. Young people would start dancing so that people could see, this is what you're afraid of? Really? Right? And so it was a very activist kind of time. And then, as was referenced in the introduction, the Music and Youth Task Force formed when a council person got on board. A council person named Richard Conlon decided, hey, what they're saying makes sense. There's nothing very scary about all ages music. And so he got on board, and then others started getting on board. And finally, we were able to get the Teen Dance Ordinance repealed. And in the course of that time, we also were trying to lift an all ages venue in Seattle, and came together with a couple of key people. And we really drove that forward to launch in January of 2001. So Vera is now 20 years old, if I can hardly believe it myself, but launched an all ages space, and we didn't have a dime. Everybody was volunteering. We were scraping together to make it work, but we got it up and going, and musicians kept coming. And so it was really through grassroots activism that we were able to do that. We got displaced 3 times in 5 years and finally landed down at Seattle Center, which is where the Vera Project is now. And the Vera Project is able to operate there successfully, but really the motto and the mantra of the Vera Project is that young people direct the Vera Project, right? There are hired staff, but the direction of how things get done is really led by the young people who are involved with the Vera Project. They run the programming committee, the gallery committee, the booking committees, the audio engineering committees. All of that is run by young people themselves. So it's, it's a model for art, music, and activism that has worked really well. And I have to say, the city of Seattle, which was very resistant to having all ages venues, has come 180 degrees to where they fund the Vera Project. They support all ages sorts of efforts throughout the city. And so it took a while, but the job got done, and Seattle very much embraces all ages music as partially as an equity issue, that of course young people should have access to music and shows and be able to participate in that. It's also the talent pipeline for the music industry, right? If you don't have a stage when you're 16 years old, how are you going to be successful when you're 22, right? So all of that ties together nicely now. So that's sort of the Seattle story in short.
Thanks so much, Kate. I know that history is rich and it's difficult to condense to a short period of time, like decades of work that you have led and been a part of. So that was well done. Thank you. One more question for you, and then I want to bring Gina and Nathan into this conversation as folks that I know that are working on creating spaces sort of in that community-run, all ages vein. Kate, I think it was helpful you pinpointed a few things that were key to your success with Vera in terms of gaining the attention of elected officials and engaging the full scope of the community. So those were the successes. I'm wondering, in retrospect, is there anything that you feel like you wish had been done differently? The other kind of lesson learned? Or what's the most important correction that has been made since Vera was started?
Well, you know, our third home was at 4th and Virginia. So in the heart of the city, and it was an old black box theater, and it was funky, and we loved everything about it until our 3-year lease expired, and we had to move to Seattle Center. And someone had pointed out this space, and I went down and looked at it, and it was just a really blank canvas that looked like it had little opportunity to be engaging for young people. Until I took a group of young people down there who were like, hell yeah, perfect. So then we were able to move in there, but I wish I hadn't been the one who was like, oh no, that'll never work at first, because it turned out to be a really, really good location for Vera. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Kate. Maybe we'll work our way towards Portland. So let's start with Nathan and then come to Gina. Nathan, can you tell us a bit about what your efforts are like in Boise? What's the all-age situation there right now, and where do you see the big challenges and the big opportunities?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I ran an all-ages venue for 10 years in neighboring Nampa, Idaho. Just was out of a coffee shop. And then 4 years ago, we realized some limitations of that, and I wanted to make it more of a community space, more youth-owned and run. And so that's when we co-founded Boise All Ages Movement Project with some friends. And so right at that time, we hit like kind of the major real estate boom in downtown Boise. And that's really, put a wrench in trying to get our own space. Through that time, we've done pop-up venues. One was at a restaurant that it was essentially changing hands and had 9 months where they were just going to be dormant. So they asked if we wanted to set up in there and do shows, and we did that. We did a similar thing in another coffee shop for a couple of years. So it's been kind of like, going where we can, where the opportunities present themselves, trying to make sure that there are shows available, while at the same time recognizing that what we really wanted was a hub of where youth could come and just like, like David and Ido said earlier, like just find people who are trying to do the same thing, really try to galvanize what their projects are on and share ideas and stuff like that. So we've been working toward that. We partnered recently with Boise Rock School, who is also looking for a building. And so we are in the process of making that happen. In the meantime, we've also kind of been, I don't want to say forced, but we've had some opportunities come up and pushing us towards more music strategy and music policy for the city of Boise, and really trying to work with our city officials. And, Kate's been a great mentor in that, and just trying to follow in some of those footsteps of making sure that our city officials recognize and not only then recognize, but invest in our future, especially as real estate gets so tight and as things are so difficult for all ages opportunities. Idaho's liquor laws are, I believe, probably the strongest of any of the states represented here as far as restrictions. So that's another thing we have to deal with.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. Gina, can you share with us a bit about your work with Friends of Noise and what y'all are up to?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we actually started some years ago as a result of a panel just like this one, which really speaks to the power of bringing voices together like this. But we, and I know Kerry knows this part because he was involved in many of these early conversations, but we, basically saw the void in Portland of not having a dedicated all ages music venue, and really wanted to change that, and came together to figure out how we could advocate for youth in Portland, and really owe such a debt, as other folks on the call have echoed, to Kate's work and the Vera Project's work in terms of just being such a model and a vision of what it could look like to have a truly youth-led organization. So something that we have been doing from the very start is making sure that we have young folks involved in every aspect of what we're doing, from helping with booking to live sound and production management, and almost all of our events have been filmed. So, folks on the videography side. So that's been a huge, huge piece of it. Graphic design, it's all aspects of, there's just such a wonderful kind of myriad of careers that, that are open to folks in music, and just helping youth get a foothold in some of those opportunities from a young age, and paid opportunities in most cases, which has also meant a lot to us. And of course, we established a youth artist directory so that young musicians can find one another and collaborate, which I know Ado mentioned, and David mentioned, I wish we had that. So, we try to encourage collaboration. And the other part of the model is having adults, prominent musicians out in Portland, performing on bills with youth artists, so that there is a natural mentorship that happens even within the context of just, a show. And that's been really beautiful to watch. So a mix of those concerts, those workshops, and until we have a dedicated space, that's all happening in a kind of a roving way, where we have sort of a mobile PA unit that we can take all over the city. And we've been doing shows in Portland parks, and we've been doing shows at farmers markets, and around venues. I've definitely hosted some things at Holocene as well, because we do a fair amount of all ages there too. But we've just kind of tried to use, our dream is absolutely that youth-led arts hub and physical venue, but in the meantime have actually been enjoying the ability to reach different neighborhoods and try to serve as many youth as possible. And of course, trying to center BIPOC and queer voices as much as we can in the youth community is crucial to us as well. And also, Andre is on the call. He just hopped in via phone on the road. So I did want to give him a chance if he wanted to add anything.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Check. Great. Awesome. Oh, so yeah, Gina did a great job of encapsulating a lot of what Friends of Noise does. But at its heart, it's about, education, fun, and opportunity to produce their own shows. Before the pandemic started, we were having bands who were creating their own lineups, who were just hitting us up for the PA, hitting us up for space. And that's even continued now that we're hopefully coming out of a pandemic. Like Gina said, we are in the process of doing a lot of shows out at Portland Parks and Rec. They've been a huge partner. And at the heart of what we do, it's, we provide education by teaching young people how to get gear, how to produce, how to create their own content. The second thing we do is produce the shows where once young people have learned how to put on a show, we invite them to put on their own shows. And then the last thing that we really do that has been really crucial to our growth has been, like Dina said, is creating paid opportunities for kids. So we are renting out our gear to adults, and we're having young people be basically audio-visual professionals for other local nonprofits. Partnership with other groups has been such a key part of our efforts, whether it's with Brown Go Rise or ERCO or IPRC. If there are young people who want to find spaces to express themselves, we do everything in our power to create those spaces for them. Right now, we're actually talking with the developer to try and make some real headway into getting our own space. Metro, one of our local government entities, is putting out an RFP for a 150 mixed income housing complex. And our goal and dream is to have a all ages venue / community arts center as part of that housing complex. So now to also be in East Portland, the goal is to not only have it be accessible to the families and young people that live in the complex, but also for the entire neighborhood, if not the entire city. The vision is, how do we start getting infrastructure for arts that are focusing young people outside of the downtown core? How do we start creating kind of a dialogue between the major arts organizations that are downtown and bringing art to where the people are in East Portland? The team on the board has been so helpful in so many different ways, like Gina, like giving us access to Holocene. Mulu, who used to work at White and Candy, has been incredibly important to this organization. And having a great board of musicians, young people, has just been so important to getting access and to really getting community buy-in. So I'm thrilled to be on this call, and thank you. Thank you for all your interest in affirming and really affirming the need for an all-ages music ecosystem, like Carrie said, is accessible to all.
Awesome. Thank you for finding a way, Andre. I feel like that is what you do. You find a way, and you find a way to get into this panel even while you are running around taking care of business. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You and Gina brought up a couple of things that I want to make sure we circle back to. You brought up sort of questions of intersectionality with BIPOC and queer movements. And you brought up the important question, I think, of geography that I want to come back to as well. But I want to make sure that we loop in our final guest here, who's been incredibly patient and I think has a really important perspective on this issue from what is often seen as sort of like just a totally different area, which is commercial live music. And, you know, those of us who work in this sort of community-driven nonprofit art space often get focused on that. But most people's music experiences are at commercial music venues. I don't know if that's a term that you like, Casey, or if there's something you prefer I use instead of commercial music. But like, this is where many of us saw the shows that changed our lives, that continue to see shows that change our lives. And even if we have a fantastic, amazing, all ages, nonprofit, youth-led space in our city, there's still all of these concerts happening in, you know, quote unquote, traditional spaces or commercial spaces. And what can we do in our communities to make sure that young people have access to those concerts in those spaces as well? And I would add, you know, COVID, the many painful lessons it's taught us is, I think we all feel that absence in our lives really sharply, right? Like we're music people, that's why we're here, and we have not been able to go to concerts. And I think joy is a human right. I think music is a human right, and we're deprived of that right now. And so Casey, please tell us a bit about what you do, what's the situation in San Francisco, and in this particularly challenging moment for commercial venues, what are the opportunities you see for building a more inclusive future of commercial music access?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Carrie, and thanks Mira and MusicPortland for hosting this. Really inspiring to hear some of these stories so far. That's kind of been one of the most interesting aspects of this. You know, I run a venue in downtown San Francisco, and then all of a sudden, you know, our whole industry is shut down. But now we've been connected through the National Independent Venue Association to all these great groups and been inspired by some actions in Austin and Chicago, and we've kind of galvanized our own organizing and advocacy in San Francisco and California. So it's really it's been a pretty amazing experience these past several months. But you know, commercial venues, for-profit venues, a large part of what we kind of stood up to in the early parts of our advocacy is that arts and culture is often considered a nonprofit group, and the support of arts and culture by government is a nonprofit kind of exercise. So aligning these for-profit venues and nonprofit venues has been a challenge for all of this, but I think we're there. You know, we're working with a larger coalition in California to do that. You know, and a part of that, so we've organized and we've engaged with our elected officials and some backgrounds around the all ages access in California. So our liquor laws, the ABC Alcohol Commission, they regulate that, and there is not, and there has not been a music venue specific liquor license. We all have to, typically venues get the restaurant license. I think it's the type 47 restaurant license. And so in order to have an all ages concert at our venues, you have to serve a certain amount of food in relation to the sales of the alcohol. And so that just kind of doesn't really make sense. It's kind of led to a lot of kind of performative actions. You know, some venues give out a bag of peanuts with every drink that is bought just to like try to meet these requirements. And so one of our state senators who represents San Francisco, Scott Wiener, he has introduced a legislation that would create a music venue specific liquor license. You know, these ABC laws haven't been updated since the 70s or so. So they're really archaic and they don't apply. And so this music venue specific liquor license, among many other things, would remove that bona fide eating requirement to allow all ages into venues. And you know, his argument, and the argument that we've gotten a lot of traction with for venues, you know, the value of venues is the economic impact that it brings to neighborhoods and communities. And so he's saying that this is, you know, this is going to help venues recover. It opens up our audiences to a larger audience. And it also kind of like, I don't know what's going on in Oregon, but a lot of the liquor laws have been relaxed in COVID. There's takeout cocktails. There's, you know, drinks can expand into sidewalks. And so it's just like, hey, this works. It helps small businesses. Let's like make this permanent. So that's kind of the impetus there. And a lot of our venues are very excited about kind of pursuing this. It's legislation that's going through California government. I've learned a lot about government in the past year. I never thought I would have to, but I think it's several more committees, but it's going through and there's not a ton of objections so far. So it's really, really fascinating. And it's a great effort to, you know, think about the policy ways that can help venues recover from this pandemic and not just giving money.
Casey, thanks so much. That's a really, I think, promising and exciting direction that y'all are headed in California. And the rest of the folks in this room, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, are you aware of any similar efforts in your states at this point? Or is this sort of a first in the nation test case?
I'm not aware of any specifically. We've recognized that there is an opportunity now, perhaps, like Casey was saying, as things have changed, as things come out of the pandemic. One thing that has, I don't know how many years ago, so a couple years ago, our brewery lobby essentially lobbied to allow families and all ages into their breweries. And so they got together and that was approved so that, you know, their brewery spaces are like essentially sort of like a classified maybe in more like a museum or sort of thing like that. So that's something that we have seen. There's a local venue in town who, you know, who bought some brewery equipment because of that. and has made that work, you know, for better or for worse. But that is something that an idea that it's on the table.
And here,
If I can add, this is Andre again. One thing that we tried to do is take advantage of the pandemic to some degree. I want to give a lot of props to Gina and the team at Holocene and to Jim Bromberg from the Mississippi Studios Empire. We've started producing content called Friends of Noise TV and shooting all ages concerts in their venues because obviously now they can't serve alcohol. And we've been engaging in conversations to say, hey, how can we continue this relationship, whether it's Saturday or Sunday matinee shows in a way that really create a pipeline, as Kate mentioned, of getting young people on these professional stages and really demonstrating the strength and quality of their creativity and their work. Also want to give props to Carrie Clark in his previous iteration as executive director of Young Audiences. Their live set program, Live Sound Engineering for Teens, has been an incredible opportunity for young people to learn how to do live sound. In fact, almost all of the young sound engineers that we work with have been graduates of that program. And it's been a really great collaborative project to really let young people know that there's job opportunities, that there's life experience that they can start getting now that can pay dividends in the future. So I do think that there will need to be a strong collaborative effort between commercial and nonprofits as a means of economic development for these young people. So I really appreciate this conversation.
and in Oregon, on the regulatory front, we're looking forward towards a very lucky door opening in the regulatory structure here, where coming out of COVID and also coming out of the State Liquor Control Commission having just gone through a big rethinking of itself as it brought in cannabis rules under its umbrella. They're opening up their entire all ages rule book at some point this summer for revision and review. And so there's this sort of crack in the door of how things have been difficult that we're hoping to gather energy and push towards. We have a similar situation in California that venues are largely either considered bars or restaurants, depending upon, do you serve more food or do you serve more alcohol? And this isn't a great match for what a music venue actually is. It's a cultural space, right? In some way at its core. And we actually do have, again, a license type that fits that in Oregon, that is used for places like the Moda Center or like the big theaters downtown. And we're seeing that as a potential alley to push towards, as a way to just be thinking more openly about what this means for regulators.
Thanks for that update, Eben. I think that is incredibly exciting news in the nerdiest possible way. You know, I forget whose quote it is. I hope it's not someone terrible that I'm forgetting, but like there's a quote about, you know, there's amazing how much power there is at local assembly meetings if you can stay awake, right? And that's true in so many ways. And, for people, you know, small regulatory changes can make a huge difference. And I'm really excited to hear that there's that potential, sounds like in California, in Oregon, and I know we'll hear more about that from you, Eben and Mara, in the breakout sessions, I believe, and moving forward from the organization. Just to do a quick time check with everyone, it's about 6:50 right now. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Eben or Mara, is we'll kind of do this format till about 7, and then we'll switch over to Q&A. And I see that there are some cues lining up in the box there. So please don't think we're ignoring you. We will get to those. There's so many things that I want to ask all of you. So like, I mean, this is my nerd space. I would gladly stay on this chat for the next 3 hours and just not sleep. But I'll follow up with y'all afterwards. But two topics, as I mentioned, that came up that I think are really important as we think about how do we make a future of music that is more inclusive, more accessible than even the best cases were before the pandemic. right? I shudder a little bit when we talk about like silver linings. People have died. Like it's not, there's no silver lining. But we're at a place in time where there's a before. We've all experienced something that was a significant disruption as a community and as a world, and there's going to be an after. And so how do we make the after better than the before? I think that, you know, I've seen something in the last couple of years where a lot of punk communities, indie rock communities have been, in some cases, asking themselves questions about like, well, was this a segregated space and we didn't realize it? Was this a space where people could come, but it wasn't actually inclusive and inviting in all of the ways that we'd want it to be to queer people, to people of color, to people with disabilities? And so that's just a question I'd like to put out to this group is how do we, the Biden phrase comes to mind again, to sort of build back better. Like how do we make this better? What are those spaces that have been incredibly problematic blind spots in our DIY music communities in the past? And what do we need to keep in mind when we're building the inclusive DIY art spaces and music communities as a whole in the future? So I put that out to the full group. Please chime in if you have thoughts about that.
I think
Hi, this is Andre
I'm so
again.
sorry.
Oh,
Hey,
go ahead.
Andre?
No, go ahead. I'll wait.
Andre,
Yeah, I'll wait.
let's let Ado go first, and then we'll loop you in. Is that cool?
I agree. That's what I said. I'll wait.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Andre. I feel definitely like being just a Black artist in Portland and like making like hip hop and like being involved with so much Black art. It's like definitely when I first moved here, Portland's always been a city that's very like indie based, like indie music based, and like trying to break into an industry that is so like popular at the time being is really difficult. So I think like, especially being in a place that is so indie, there's been a lack of support in trying to break into an industry or even build an industry for hip hop or like that big of industry in Portland. So I think if there is a possible way, I've like thought about this for a very long time, but if there is a way to like truly like bring together like the hip hop artists or like the R&B artists of Portland, the POC and the queer members of that community, and really start bringing them together, so then like we can build our own wave and like have support from the community itself to build that own wave. I think that's really important. Hearing friends of Noise is doing, I would love to connect with them and like see if like we could help y'all find a space or find a place to bring together like POC and like queer people to like make music, because like this is like what it is. Like we all just want to make money off of this. We just want this to be taken as serious as a career as like a banker is doing. So we want to know how we can get that help so then we can start doing that.
Ado, thank you for that. Ado, thank you for that. No, please reach out to me. Sorry, I can't type in my info in the chat, but Mira has it. One thing to talk about before pandemic, post-pandemic, ownership is such a huge part of this. When the first round of CARES money was distributed to venues and art organizations, all that money went to cis white men because they were the ones who held the reins and owned venues and were the executive directors of relatively large nonprofit organizations. And when I saw the list of arts organizations and venues across the state that were receiving CARES money, I was shocked and I was appalled. And I reached out to Mir, I reached out to Jim, I reached out to Suba and said, hey, how do we not have this be the standard of who gets support at the beginning of this pandemic? And I have to once again give props to Jim and Mira for responding by saying, Andre, you're right. How do we start to incubate ownership in BIPOC communities? And that's what I do hope that the Princess Noise space ends up becoming, is literally an incubator space where people can learn, where people can share, and where people can grow to a point where they have access and they are controlling their own destinies. one of the things that Friends of Noise did during the pandemic, which was, I think, key, was we ended up being almost a re-grantor. We ended up receiving a fair amount of funds, and we ended up paying artists, $300, $400, $500 just for sets, because we knew that that was an economic impact in their lives. So ownership, collaboration. There is a group in town right now called the Pdx Hip-Hop Collective. They are all artists, organizers, promoters who are coming together in a grassroots way. Before the pandemic, they were meeting at a local radio station, and now they're meeting on Zoom. So please find them on Instagram. It's a great bunch of folks. They're planning concerts this summer. Portland also has the Pdx Hip-Hop Week that was founded by Star Child, DJ OG1, and DJ Cliff. That is going to be happening this August, and that is also a testament to the power of hip-hop and the power of collective action. So it's happening. It's just a matter of how do we really find each other and connect. So Friends of Noise is happy to be a conduit to share that information and to make sure those connections actually happen.
Yeah, that's my mechanical hand. I will say also that I think as Eben and I and many others have been diving deeper into why is Portland such an unequal space for performers and genres and things like that. And I think a big part of it is, and this is true for the all ages conversation, is that we're comfortable. And, the Oregon Music Hall of Fame just, was releasing their previous winners of their $2,500 college grant. And it was to a cello player, a clarinet player, a violin player. It's Western European traditional music, when what they honor as inductees is popular music, and sort of populist music. So there's a disconnect, I think, in a lot of cases where, the most popular music form in the world right now is hip hop, but people can't find success here in hip hop. They go elsewhere and people lose their minds. So it has to be intentional, like by every single person that touches anything about music, from bookers to policy, it's got to be everybody. And we had a long way to go. But we can get there, standing together.
Thank you, Mara. Just to add a comment here, and then we'll go over to Q&A, even though I have a zillion more things I want to ask y'all, like I said. But just one thing I would add is, we live, by some measures, those of us sort of in this northwestish corner of the country, in the most geographically spread out collection of metropolises in the country. And those, I see nods from folks who work in the touring and venue side of things, because they know that the challenges that creates in terms of retaining artists who can make a living in their city, in terms of bringing through certain tours, in terms of making their venues viable. And so I think that the conversations within our cities around all ages music and what makes for a thriving ecosystem are really important. But this kind of conversation amongst our cities and across our borders and across our states is also really important. And so I hope that we can keep that part of the conversation going as well. One plug that I think probably a lot of people on this video call know about, but I'm just going to share it in case not, is this book. I will share it with MusicPortland so that they're aware of it if they're not. It's a little of its time in that it's from 10 years ago, but it's the best thing that I know of its type, which is it's called In Every Town, an All Ages Music Manual Festo. And it's a series of case studies of different all ages music spaces around the country. Different models, Vera being one, but there's others. And there's something to learn from all of them. And every city is unique, every community is unique. And the book is still available for order through the distributor. I don't have the link handy, but I'll dig for it maybe during the Q&A. But it's worth reading if this is a topic that you're interested in, just because there's great ideas, success stories and unsuccess stories to learn from. Let's go to Q&A now, if that works for everyone. I want to thank all of our panelists, not off the yet, but just in terms of our conversation so far. I so appreciate all of you. But Q&A, I'm going to go to the Q&A box. That's a great way to submit questions. And Eben and Mara and Austin, y'all are practiced in this, so chime in if I'm missing something or if there's another way. We'll start with a question that came in earlier from Jamie Dunphy, who says, prior to COVID-19, in the absence of dedicated spaces for all ages audiences and all ages artists, where are artists finding audiences? Were house shows or pop-ups still happening? Have underage artists been able to find any opportunities to perform in 21 and over facilities, or are booking agents not booking? Seems to me like our young musicians are maybe the best to answer that first, and then maybe some of our other panelists.
Before COVID, there were like house shows, and like it was possible to like get venues here and there. Moving forward, I think like people I know who are throwing house shows, like they're not really doing that anymore. And then like again, as long as like things are dangerous to be in large groups of people, like I don't know when like we're gonna be popping back into like actual venues again. And like again, it's very difficult for us to even get at venues without doing like a pay to play situation. So like I think hopefully like meeting with like other groups, and like I know here at the Numbers, like we have a stage, and like we're gonna try and like open up some performances, and then we also have the space outside that we want to use for performances. So we're gonna try and do like that type of business there. But it's just all like, again, like COVID's shut down so many opportunities for people to like actually have like in-person like energy filled performances.
If I can chime in once again, Friends of Noise has been on the verge of starting to challenge our governmental infrastructure into how to make more spaces accessible to shows. And right now, parks seem to be a strong possibility. But unfortunately, the cost of reserving a park and getting the permits to a park are really prohibitive. So we're starting to lobby them to say, how can we not classify concerts that are community-based, that are community-driven, that are not trying to be like, like a Tap Blue Ribbon event, or to be, a North by Northwest event that is commercially driven. How do we make these, there are local amphitheaters, there's so much real estate that is being underutilized, and there's so many potentially buildings that are owned by local governmental agencies like Parks and Metro in the city that could be repurposed. And the one, Carrie talked about, in commercial spaces. Well, Friends of Noise was able to get teen artists to open up for prominent local artists at the Doug Fir, at Mississippi Studios, and at Holocene. In fact, right now, Holocene and Friends of Noise are partnering with the Wasserman Group to bring a gentleman named Charlie Berg to Portland. And unfortunately, it's been postponed 3 times due to the pandemic. But they've expressed a real interest in having local youth acts open up for this national touring artist. How do we make that the norm and not the exception? And I think it means, really talking and collaborating with commercial venues to show that there's an untapped resource that they need to really start paying attention to.
Anyone else want to get in on this one, or should I read the next question?
Well, just to piggyback a little bit on what Andre was saying, I think that that's absolutely true, that there is, a lot of this conversation has focused maybe on the specifically local music ecosystem. But I think when, to speak to the aspect of the question about, touring, booking agents, routing tours across the country, I think there is such a desire for all ages shows, and a lot of artists would prefer to play all ages, but are having to take 21 plus if it's their only option. And then additionally, there's just a ton of really amazing artists that are just on the rise that are under 21 themselves. And so of course they want to be able to play for their own peers. Like they don't want to have to rule out their own peers in these shows. And so, you know, and especially with, I think, on an industry level, TikTok is now like absolutely just like kind of the metric now for a lot of what major labels are signing, and that means a younger audience, and that means younger musicians are changing the game. I mean, we hosted Billie Eilish some years ago, and I mean, you know, she's just revolutionary in a lot of ways, and you know, and so her influence is just sort of unparalleled right now. And so anyway, you know, you look at these younger artists, and I think if we had more all ages spaces or more ability and ease to do all ages shows across the city and other cities, there would be absolutely plenty of tours to root through, and maybe folks who might even have skipped Portland if it weren't for you know, for lack of opportunities or something like that. So anyway, that's just something I've noticed on the venue front is, wow, it's like there's such a desire among agents to have more all ages. So anyway, yeah.
No, thanks, Gina. That's like an incredibly helpful perspective to share. I see nodding. Eben, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I was going to ask Gina if you could tell me more about what are the impediments that make that not able to happen, in your view, from your standpoint. That if there's such a desire, what's getting in the way at the place where the rubber meets the road that you know well?
Totally. Well, you know, I think it really comes down to a mix of, you know, as Carrie suggested early in the conversation, the fact that alcohol is the main source of income and profit for most venues. And so, you know, a lot of times in an all ages show, you know, with decreased alcohol sales, either because most of the attendees are underage or because, you know, it's maybe not as naturally set up for alcohol consumption as the 21 plus counterpart show would be. You just, you know, the profits are, you know, it may be just difficult, you know, for a lot of venues to justify, you know, when the margins on live music are already pretty thin on the venue level. And then also, you know, it's a lot of, you know, the regulatory aspect is a piece of it too. It's complex. It's, you know, you're kind of like, a lot of these little rules to follow, like making sure it's bright enough inside to read a newspaper. That's one of the rules. So at an all ages show, you'll see me like standing at a light switch, frowning, just like, look, you know, am I doing it? Does this seem, you know, so that kind of thing. Or, you know, just the security involved to keep, you know, alcohol consumption kind of, you know, segregated to those over 21, you know, so there's a lot of extra costs and maybe fewer profits. So I think that's really maybe what it comes down to. It's something that for us, you know, under my venue hat, we are really, it's a priority for us. It's important to us. And we really do believe these young folks are leading the industry. So we do it, but it is, you know, it is challenging, and I don't fault other venues for not doing it because I know the challenges. So anyway, yeah.
I think a question that begs, and Eben, I wonder if this is a direction that some of the work you're going to be help guiding as part of the policy group is going to be going, is like, what are those specific regulations? Gina brought up an example of the newspaper reading. Like, what are those things that create a barrier that increase costs for the venue? Like, everyone wants venues to be safe. Like, everyone who's passionate about all ages music is passionate about youth and youth having fulfilling, thriving lives. No one is in this conversation because they want to sell alcohol to kids. They're in this conversation because they want young people to have access to music, and navigating alcohol is part of navigating the world, right? Like, it's everywhere in the world. And so what are reasonable regulations? What are, you know, what is an unreasonable regulatory burden to put on venues, and what's a reasonable one? Also, what's effective? Like, I think that's an important question to know the answer to that I'm not sure that there's great studies on. So that's an interesting question. And those of you who put on shows, I think have really important perspectives on this, and I hope will be part of that conversation. A question that's in the Q&A here that's related to this too, that came up earlier, is outside of the constraints of the real estate market, is there an example of a business model for live music that doesn't include alcohol sales, but also can turn a profit? Does anyone have a story, like a case study that they would share that is a good example? You know, I've not been able to look at the books of spaces that have taken alternate approaches, but like, I think we can all probably name, like, there's been coffee house venues before. I don't know how well run they've been. There've been you know, restaurants that kind of are half restaurant, half venue. You know, what are some other interesting models out there? I've also wondered, could there be a nonprofit like promoter, presenter that would cover the cost differential for having all ages shows in what would normally not be an all ages space? Like, what are some other approaches that maybe are lesser tried?
Well, I think an important thing to consider is how we are centering and honoring the impact of the arts on our community writ large. And when you look at things like the Holland Project, that venue is an integral part of their community. And the arts are not seen as an extravagance. And they realize how important it is to give young people not only opportunities to see professional touring artists, but vice versa. How do we get adults to see youth as intrinsic part of the music ecosystem and as an intrinsic part of their community? So much of what we try and do is not to reapply agency that's been taken away, but to make sure that young people have agency from day one. And I think that, you know, the model of centering alcohol consumption and sales is definitely taking away young people's agency. And how can we find, you know, maybe it is quasi-governmental, maybe it is a hybrid where it's subsidized like the Vera Project is. I mean, I've been to the Vera Project. I love what they're doing. I've studied them. But the fact is, if without the subsidies from the government, it'd be hard pressed for them to do what they do. I think education is a big part of this. You know, right now, a lot of arts education is centered in schools, which is great. But it really needs to be centered in community. It really needs to meet people where they are. So I do think there are possibilities, and hopefully conversations like this are really starting to explore them.
I think sort of comes back to what Andre was saying earlier about ownership too. Like, one of the reasons we had a couple of opportunities to do lease or long-term lease options, but we really recognized that because things changed so much and because of real estate, we needed to own, and we needed to like take that main piece, that main cost out of there. You know, like we decided to go nonprofit route, so trying to raise the funds to get that mortgage payment taken care of, so then the rest is a little more feasible to deal with.
Another idea that Friends of Noise has been playing with is a membership model. How can we figure out that if we own a space and give back to the space 24/7, could we potentially sell memberships where, you know, for $20 a month, you get to go to unlimited shows. So that's another thing that we've been toying with.
Kate, I think I saw you come off mute, yeah?
Yes, unfortunately, I don't know of any great models to share other than giant all ages festivals, which can operate at a profit. We have a big EDM scene, or we did before COVID anyhow, and those are able to operate at a profit. But I love what Nathan said about figuring out how to own the space so that then you only have to worry about operating expenses. And if there is a way to do that, and yes, the Vera Project gets some government support, but the primary support is donors. It just took a long time to build up that donor base because the participants were all teenagers when we started, right? So it took a while for them to become adults, realize the importance of the Vera Project to their lives, and turn around and be donors and engage with the Vera Project that way. But it's hard to hold on that long, to make something work that long while someone, you know, literally comes into having a cost analysis in their life that allows them to donate. So yeah.
There's some really interesting suggestions happening in the chat box too. So if you're not keeping an eye on that, there's people who are bringing up maybe is there a model from Salt Lake City or cultures where alcohol plays a different role than it does in many places we're talking about. Some other interesting ideas in the chat to keep your eye on. Evan, I see a raised hand.
Sure. I think within the industry that does exist too, within this world that is fundamentally focused around alcohol sales, it's worth thinking through what that danger is. And I think that there's a sense of overemphasizing the risk of exposure to alcohol versus the risk of being cut off from culture and not being able to see things that are important to you. Like, that's not nothing. You know, particularly as we're becoming better versed in an understanding of mental health, sort of writ large. Like, there are balances to what it means to have access to culture and to be able to see the things that you love live. There's an interesting statistic from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is basically the substance and mental health arm of Health and Human Services federally, which is that youth drinking, as reported, approximately 2.5% of it happens at combined sports events and concerts. This is the federal government's number, as opposed to, I think, 83% happening at home. So when we're thinking about what risk spaces are for unhealthy alcohol stuff, basically, we might actually have it backwards. And I think it's worth thinking and talking about it in that way too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like one of my other, aside from working in arts education on the nonprofit side, I was a middle school ELL educator in East Portland for a number of years. And my admittedly anecdotal experience working with youth is like, giving people the opportunity to do what they love is like the most radical intervention you can make in someone's life. And so giving people space who care about music to be part of music, there's nothing you can do that's going to be more critical for their improved health than that. So I absolutely agree with you. Eben, do y'all want to switch over to the breakout rooms? You want to keep going in this format? I'd love to give the last word in this format to Ado, David, and Taya. I think that's only appropriate. But I just want to check in and see where we are in terms of our time and the rest of the structure.
Yeah, I think we are coming towards the end. Let's see here. We have one last question. Joining in this initiative, which I think is a great question for us to answer. So what we're going to do next, there's these amazing groups that are here today, and reach out, get involved. If you're a Portland person, get involved with Friends of Noise. There's so much to do, and there's so much work to be done, and there's so much to be excited about. That's really worth your time and energy on the ground floor. Here in Music Portland's side of things, we're for the next few months going to be really laser focused on thinking about how to get some regulatory reforms through with the window that's opening this summer. And we would love to invite folks to sign up with the link we've been dropping in the chat, so we can have more community conversations like this, but with you, about what's working, what's not working. And for different parts of this community, what are some changes we could imagine that could make this work better for everyone? Specifically how the liquor regulation works, as that is this opportunity we have to be thinking about. So that's ways that you can lean in on the ground floor and up here in Nerd Zone. And everyone is welcome in Nerd Zone. It's a really wonderful place where you can make a big difference. So Yeah, I feel like that's our statement. Mara, you have anything to add?
No, I'm copying the link into the chat. Definitely copy the Zoom link I just put in there, because that's where we're going to step over, and we want to hear from everybody. You know, hopefully this conversation has fired some folks up. Everybody's got something to input here. All the ideas, I think opening it up to all ideas is the best way to go forward. So please copy that link. If you lose it, go to musicportland.org/events, and you can click into the event and it'll show you how to get into the after party. But yeah, I'm eager to hear what everybody has to say about this. I'm hoping that that Ado, David, and Talia will stay with us and keep talking. That would be great.
Carrie, do you want to take us to the last bit of conversation? Give folks last word?
Yeah, I would love to just check back in with Taya, David, and Ado to get any final bits of wisdom or input from y'all. If there's one thing you want the group of people in this room or in this chat to hear, what would that be?
I just wanted to tap in right quick. I've definitely heard a lot of different perspectives, and a lot of people talk about wanting to connect community more. Something me, Ado, and David have been working on here at The Numbers is our show, Serendipity at The Numbers, which really is trying to focus on talking about local artists, putting people onto local artists, talking about artists, new media, and just really just like getting people involved with things. So that's what we've been doing here too, and definitely emphasis on POC, because we had the conversation that here in Portland, especially when I came here, at least I definitely saw the lack of support, and given like the history of what Portland has done as far as like gentrifying things, and it's just something that I wanted to let everybody know that is going to be happening here at The Numbers. So yeah.
Yeah, incredible group of people doing amazing things. So definitely listen in. I put the link to the numbers.fm in the chat. Hopefully everybody has copied the Zoom link to keep the conversation going. Oh, sorry. I think I've interrupted. I don't mean. Ado and David, did you have closing remarks?
Just something that to add on to Tez. Our show begins May 21st. For anyone who wants to listen, we definitely intend on just trying our best to push the names of young Portland artists that we know. We want to meet more young Portland artists, and like again, like kind of just to reiterate everything that we've been saying, we really do believe in like we want to make Portland as big as a city as New York or LA or Atlanta when it comes to music. So however we can do that, we're going to do our best to, and we just hope that everyone else is open to support and help out.
David, any last words from you two?
I'd just like to reiterate the points that both Ado and Tay were saying. That is definitely our focus, and you know, the objectives that we've talked about through like different youth organizations and whatnot, I think should be the focus going forward. At the very least, it's what we as youth want and are in need of right now. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Incredible panel. I think that I've learned things, and I'm sure others have as well. And thanks to everyone who's made the time to be here, part of the conversation. Thank you to Evan and Mara and Austin and the team at Music Portland. And Mara has just put in the chat, so it's there as the last thing is the link to the after party So hopefully we'll see some of y'all over there to continue the conversation. But thanks for making the time, and let's make a more inclusive, more thriving, more vibrant music community. We can do it. So let's dig in.
Thank you, everyone. See you in the after.